Hello again, this is Jordan Sperber, and welcome back to Solving Basketball. Today we have another concept type episode. The first one I did was about working in college basketball, but this one is more about playing in college basketball. More specifically, an inside look at the whole topic of transferring, which I've seen a lot on Twitter recently. I think there's a lot more to the transfer issue in college basketball than fans realize or even that the media reports. And politics have a lot to do with that. To be blunt, national media want information from coaches, and coaches want positive press from the national media. That being said, I should be transparent and say, obviously, I'm not completely free from those political forces. The coaching industry is something I might want to get back into in the future, or at least have the opportunity. But I think I'm in a position to give a relatively unique perspective on the transfer issue that's a little more grounded in reality, even though it's a little different from the typical Solving Basketball episode. To prepare for this podcast, I talked to several players, both on and off the record, and some of them are currently active in the NCAA, some of them have already graduated. I actually recorded my conversation with one of them, and that's Leland King. Leland started his career at Brown, where he was an all Ivy League type player. He transferred halfway through his sophomore year, I think about 17 games in, when he was averaging 15 points and 8 rebounds a game, playing 26 minutes a game. After that transfer decision, he committed to Nevada, where I was on the coaching staff for a year, while he was sitting out his one sit-out year as a transfer. His junior season at Nevada, where he was on the court, he averaged 4 points and played 10 minutes a game. So clearly not the same numbers and minutes that he had been used to at Brown. Even though he was a junior eligibility-wise, he graduated after that season and decided to grad transfer to UC Santa Barbara. That decision paid off big time for Leland. He averaged 16 points and 10 rebounds in his last year of college basketball and played 32 minutes a game. He also, and this is extremely impressive, managed to get his master's degree in that 1 year at UCSB, which is pretty awesome and not always the norm for grad transfers, which has been a criticism of the rule. The fact that the players who are grad transferring aren't really getting their grad degree. It takes 2 years generally, and they're only there in college for a year before they're hopefully turning pro in professional basketball. So first things first here, the first question of the podcast, as you probably know, is always how many free throws would you make out of 100? And this is Leland's answer to that question.
I would say anywhere from 88 to 93.
Do you know what your free throw percentage was in college throughout your career?
I do not. It was all over the place.
The career free throw percentage was 69.7. Are you happy with that?
Ooh, yeah. Nah, not at all. But I remember my first year, I shot poorly from the line because it was different. I haven't really played in gyms with, with no backdrop or no wall. Because I remember the first few free throws I took in college, I was like, that's tough.
Yeah. You told me about a month ago, I think, that you've been working on your shot mechanics, changing them a little bit. Are you still doing that?
Yeah, just trying to get it more fluid. That's the biggest thing with consistency. Like, because even last year when I was, I ended up shooting probably 41% from three or something like that. But I was at like 48, and it's just a stretch where I just couldn't make a shot, and it's just really consistency about with the form.
What is basketball? What is this basketball? Is that basketball? What is basketball?
Let's start out with some hard facts about transfers first, and then try to put some context around those facts with my conversation with Leland and just some of my experience. The NCAA does a yearly report of transfers that you can find on ncaa.org. And in 2018, there were 704 confirmed transfers. Another way of looking at it is only 59 D1 schools. There was 351 of them in 2018. So only 59 of the 351 didn't have at least one player transfer. Of those 704 transfers, just 46% of them stayed in Division I with their new team. And this is the first common misconception about the whole supposed transfer epidemic. The majority of transfers are not staying in Division I. They're going either D2, junior college, or NAIA. Of the 46% that do stay in D1, the NCAA in their report classifies each of them as either up transfers, meaning they transfer to a higher level school. So this is what coaches worry about, specifically maybe mid-major coaches where their best players are going to leave to go to Kentucky or to go to Duke. The other classifications are down transfers, so going down a level, or lateral transfers. So again, 46% of the transfers stayed Division I. Of those 46%, just 17% are up transfers, at least according to the NCAA. 60% are lateral transfers, and 23% are down transfers. I'm not breaking any news with that data. It's publicly available if you want to go look at it. The up transfers understandably get a lot of attention. Those are big names committing to the best schools. But in reality, the data shows that a lot of transfers are leaving because they just aren't good enough for whatever program that they played for that year and committed to. John Rothstein had a tweet that basically sparked this whole podcast, and he said this: "To all freshmen who are considering a transfer due to lack of playing time, remember, Rui Hachimura only averaged 4.6 minutes per game 2 years ago at Gonzaga. A lot can change in 24 months." I don't even really want to get into the Hachimura case in particular. I don't know it that well. I think it's kind of a unique situation, but not really a topic for this podcast. But when I read that tweet, I think it's pretty flawed, because the reality is that in a lot of cases, the guy averaging 4.6 minutes per game doesn't even have the chance to come back and be patient if he wanted to. This isn't how all programs operate. Clearly, some are better with player development than others and have multi-year plans to get players ready to contribute. So I know this could be a little bit of a general blanket statement, but I would be comfortable saying that there are at least 100 transfers a year out of the 700 some that were told either explicitly or given very strong hints that they should move on and leave the program. And I think 100 is being pretty conservative, just based off that percentage of transfers I talked about that are going D2, NAIA, and junior college. There's even a type of recruiting strategy that some programs use where you oversign above your 13 allotted scholarships. And basically the idea being to bring in as much talent as possible. But at the end of the day, you only get 13 scholarships, and the roster eventually has a way of getting cut down. I want to be clear, Leland is not one of those guys. He wasn't run off. He left on his own. But before we even recorded, I sent him that Rothstein tweet, and then my first question to him was just an initial reaction after reading that.
I mean, my initial reaction was that, they don't really understand because, they're not in that situation or in that predicament as a player. It's just tough for the guys who don't go through it or who don't really play like that to understand why kids transfer.
So you went to high school in California at Brentwood and made, I think, what would be called an unconventional decision going to the East Coast in the Ivy League at Brown. So how did that come to be?
I mean, for me, education has always been big. So, when I got the offer from Brown, that was pretty cool in Ivy League school. And, at the time, it's kind of hard to understand in high school. But, like, at the time, I wanted to try something different. And one of my friends was going there. So I thought it'd be pretty cool to go to that school. And I knew, like, I wasn't one that necessarily that, I mean, at first I was, like, that really wanted to go high major. But as you get older, you see all these people talking about, oh, go where you fit and this and that. So I thought Brown would be pretty cool for me.
And did you have other offers? Like what was the interest level right out of high school?
I actually committed to Brown my junior year, I believe, or like going into my senior year. So I had a few offers. I had about 9 or 10, but my senior year, I actually had a really big year, and other schools were coming in, but I had already committed. So
your freshman year at Brown, you had a pretty good year, and then your sophomore year, you're averaging 15-8, probably on path to be an all Ivy League guy, and you decided to leave in January, right?
Yeah.
What was the thought process behind that, leaving midway through the year?
I mean, for me, it just really wasn't a good situation for me there. I wasn't a huge fan of the school. And, with basketball, I mean, in college, if you play a sport, your sport is the biggest part of your college experience for the most part, because that's what you're doing all the time. And, me and the coach, I just didn't really see eye to eye with the coach, and I really didn't, like, get along with the coach much. But, and it was weird for me because I've never experienced anything like that. It was just, little things that he did or would say that I just didn't think were fair. And it was just, a lot going on with that in that regard. But so I thought it was just best for me to leave in January, just because I just wasn't happy overall. It wasn't even about basketball. I just wasn't happy. So I had to leave the team.
That last part that Leland just said, I think really puts into perspective that these 17 and 18-year-olds are, making difficult decisions, going away from home for the first time, all the regular things that college kids are going through. We'll get more into that in a second, but one thing I asked Leland was who was involved in terms of family, coaches, whoever in these decision-making processes.
Mostly your parents at that time. Mostly my parents helped me, and I also had a coach that I was really close with in high school. My freshman sophomore year, he was and he became a college coach. He was a college coach at some point in his career, so I would talk to him a lot about the stuff and what to look for. And so that's really about that. Like it's really about fit, and also just where you'll be happy at. Because when I was in the East Coast, I was far away from home, and if basketball didn't work out, it just wasn't going to be a good place for me. So you want to go somewhere where you'll be comfortable no matter what the situation is, because honestly, you don't know what it can be.
Yeah. And I don't know if this was the case with you at Brown, but like, I don't think people realize that basketball players get homesick too. Like,
Exactly.
There's nothing different about basketball players, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And then especially with basketball, you don't get any time home. So that makes it another big difference, because basketball is really all year round. While other sports, they can probably get a few weeks or a month or one of the breaks to go home.
With the transfer decision, was it easy to make, I guess? Or obviously it's looked at as a negative thing by even by like NBA people, if that's your ultimate aspirations. Like, they don't want to see you transferring from multiple colleges. Then you have the fan base potentially. Was it a you just came to that decision, or was it a more drawn out process to try to figure out what to do?
I mean, I kind of came to that decision. I mean, you know kind of what you want at the end of the day, and like I said, for me, for me it was pretty easy. Like Brown, I just didn't like how I was being treated in general, and I didn't like the school, so that was the easiest decision for me to make. It was just like, okay, yeah, I can just get out of here. I mean, it's not going to affect me anyway. It's not like it's not what I want anyway. So, like, I really didn't let what other people had to say or thought affect my decision because at the end of the day, it's my life, and they're probably not going to understand regardless. So, I mean, you got to do what's best for you.
So one thing that I think is interesting about this whole discussion is that every college player has other goals. For you, obviously, you said education was a big thing, but you also want to be a professional basketball player. So how do you walk the line of your goals and the team goals, which clearly from a year coaching you, you're a team player, no doubt. Your teammates liked you, the coaching staff liked you, but you have to look out for yourself too. And really everyone in the college basketball world is doing that. Even the coaches and the video coordinators, they are trying to get a better job. Yet the big focus is the team, the team, the team, the team. So how did you manage that throughout your career?
I mean, you just play basketball. I just feel like your strength will come to light on the court, and everybody does something really well, and you can all do well. Like, I mean, guys in college now, you see, you got guys who are trying to get theirs, and sometimes, stuff is forced. But for the most part, like as a teammate, you kind of all understand that, and so I mean, especially on the good teams, like you guys all understand each other's game. So, like when people are like, "Oh, he's being selfish," or "That's a bad shot," the teammates aren't necessarily thinking that because they know it's basketball. Sometimes you're gonna make a bad decision, but for the most part, for the team, you just got to do your part. Like if you're a scorer, you score, and just know you do stuff that you work on and that you can do. Like if you're never in the gym or if you're never show anything in practice or anything else, I mean, I think that's when it's bad to do that in the game. But when you work on stuff and your teammates are confident in you, that makes the game a lot easier because they're like, okay, he can do that. And as a team, you kind of just get past all the mistakes. It's just like anything else. You just get past the mistakes and just keep moving forward as a team.
The elephant in the room in all of this talk about transfers is always the fact that coaches are doing the same exact thing. For instance, in my case, after 1 year as a volunteer grad assistant at Nevada, I got offered a full-time salary job at New Mexico State, so I took it. I don't think anyone would have thought twice about that decision or criticized it. And obviously, head coaches move all the time from job to job and often put players in tough situations that have committed to them or already used their redshirt year, so it's hard to transfer. Recently, in talking to different players about this topic, there's definitely a sense of things being unfair. And I think it's hard to argue that they're not right. Personally, I'm in favor of players being able to transfer without sitting out a year, just like I did going to NMSU. Under the current rules, the only players that can do that are grad transfers, which is where the conversation with Leland is going to shift now. I asked him if his year at Nevada was the first time in his basketball career he hadn't been getting significant minutes.
I mean, yeah, except for maybe like, 7th, 8th grade or something like that. I've played on, EYBL teams and stuff like that. So you kind of taste of it then. And yeah, I mean, that was tough for me, being in Nevada and only playing 10 minutes. It was tough. I mean, especially because, I mean, you've seen it. You know how hard I worked. I was in my whole off season, and I'm always in the gym, so it's just like, you have a lot to offer. But, we had a good team. We were winning, so it's hard to be too upset about it,
Mm-hmm. And because you sat out the year, you were able to graduate and you were a grad transfer that could play right away. Again, now that this was your second time transferring, was it something that you had been thinking about leading up to the decision? How do you tell a coach that you're going to transfer? What's that like?
Yeah, I mean, it was something I'm thinking about, but obviously, I wasn't playing much, and with my goals, at the end of the day, you have to play in order to show what you can do. So, that was the biggest thing, and just overall, just how you tell a coach. I mean, like the first time I did it, the first time I transferred, it wasn't too bad for me, but telling Coach Muss, it was different because I knew Muss saw something in me. I just, wasn't the greatest fit for that team. my style of play is much different from the rest of the team style of play, which is fine. I didn't really, I'm not tripping on that because he was a fair dude. He didn't treat me bad. He didn't do any of that stuff. So, but at the end of the day, like I want to play and I need to play, and he just didn't see me as a fit, which is fine. So I thought that was pretty easy just to go about, talk to him about it, and just do what I needed to do my last year.
So when you decided that you're going to transfer, you actually, I think it was around like the NBA finals, you texted and called me. And I think at the time you didn't really know what your interests, how schools were going to be interested in you, right?
Yeah. I mean, I just took a leap of faith just to see. Because, I had my numbers at Brown, and just being on a good team, I was pretty sure coaches understood. So, I kind of just took a leap of faith, and I'm always confident in myself. You know that about me. But so I was never really nervous or anything about the situation. But it was kind of tough, just because you were just jumping out there. It was nothing really out like a safety blanket.
What was the grad transfer market like? A lot of schools calling?
Yeah, a lot of schools call. Actually, as a grad transfer, I got more interest than as a regular transfer. I think coaches see that a guy can play right away and he has experience, this and that, so they may want you to go to their school. I don't know if because some big schools were calling me too, and I was just kind of confused, so I didn't know what they saw or what. But I was much more cautious of where I went in my last year because I didn't want to end up sitting on the bench again.
So now that it was your third time doing all these visits and going through the process, what were the specific things that led you to UCSB?
I kind of just saw how they were as a team before. I talked to the coach a lot. That coach, he called me a lot, the head coach, Coach Paschanek. And he seemed like a really good dude. And, one of the coaches on the staff is from Boise. So, he really knew my game because I had some good games in the Mountain West Conference. It's just, I just didn't get to play every game. So, just my game and a coach that calls me a lot. That was pretty big. And then honestly, the team wasn't that good the year before. So at the end of the day, I knew I would play, or, I kind of knew I had to play or would be able to earn that opportunity to play. So with all those considered, it was easy to make that choice. And also, the last thing was just really close to home. So I was like, at the end of the day, if it doesn't work out, I'll enjoy myself close to home at Santa Barbara. So it wasn't too tough of a decision.
This one clearly worked out. You were, I think I said in the beginning, first team All Big West and averaged a double-double, right?
Yeah.
Given what you know about the different levels, about just how college basketball works, if you had a family member or a friend who was a high school junior about to go through the process, what would your advice be to that person?
Like I said earlier, go to school when they need you opposed to want you, because when schools just want you, anything can happen, like you can produce, but at the end of the day, if you're not a great fit or if the coach, likes someone's games better, they're going to go with that guy. And it's not about who's better. It's just about who's a better fit. And, that's what's really tough about college and college athletes. A lot of guys see their dreams die in college because they're trying to prove themselves or trying to do this and that, when at the end of the day, like, it's just not the spot for them. So I'll make sure that, they go to a spot that's for them, and also go somewhere where you'll be comfortable besides basketball, because basketball is a big part of your college career, of course, but at the end of the day, anything can happen with basketball. You can get hurt, you can not play. Anything can happen. Coaches can change, and then it just goes down from there. And at the least, you want to be happy at the school you're at.
That last question I asked Leland about what his recommendation would be for a family member or friend going through the process, I asked that to several different players, and it was actually pretty crazy the identical responses I got about going to a place that needs you, not just wants you. I've definitely been very pro player in this podcast, but the one area where I would be a little bit more critical is in the initial recruiting process. I don't think the players are necessarily doing this. They're, for the most part, picking the best school, the highest level possible. And at the end of the day, that's another pretty big reason for the high transfer rates. Going where you're wanted but not necessarily needed leads to transferring. Another really good response I got from a player that I agree with is to worry about what the head coach thinks. So normally the way recruiting works is an assistant coach is the lead recruiter on that player. But the cliche is that the assistant coach doesn't put you in the game once you commit to that program. It's the head coach that puts you in the game and gives you playing time. So his advice was, yeah, you want to have a good relationship with the lead recruiter and all the assistant coaches, but the head coach is still the most important, and having a relationship with him and having a feel that he's the one that really wants you there is key. I want to thank Leland for his time and sharing his story. I hope that you guys found it interesting to get a little behind the scenes look at someone who did transfer a couple times. Just the last thing I'll mention quick is the whole grad transfer versus regular transfer. How Leland said he actually got more looks as a grad transfer coming from Nevada than Brown. And think about that for a second. He was averaging 15 and 8 at Brown and only 10 minutes a game at Nevada, and yet as a grad transfer, he got more looks. And that's really consistent with the NCAA data. So if you just break up their sample by grad transfers, a lot more of them are up transfers. Basically, immediately eligible grad transfers are being highly recruited by high majors. We saw Villanova, a program that you wouldn't expect take a grad transfer, take Joe Cremo this year. I don't necessarily have hard data to back this up, but intuitively, it seems pretty clear that the grad transfer market is very saturated, and the sit-out market is almost undervalued at this point. High majors just don't want guys that are going to have to sit out a year, and if you're a mid-major, you can get some talent that you probably wouldn't be getting in other circumstances through recruiting. But again, thank you so much to Leland King. I feel a little bit bad because if you listen to the Jordan Caroline episode, you know that Jordan kind of trash talked Leland a little bit. And since this was a more serious topic, I didn't really let Leland get his revenge. But I hope you enjoyed the topic, and I hope it was covered with a little more nuance and perspective than it normally is. Thank you for listening, and I'll be back next week with another guest.
No hand checking Michael Jordan, Scottie Pippen, Tony Kukoc.